Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 317. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm going to talk about the third and final topic of this mini-series on what I call the 3 questions, which I started 2 weeks ago with episode 315, where I helped you answer the question, who am I? Now that's a massive question to answer, and I believe it's a lifelong journey to self-knowledge. But we have to start somewhere, and I think it's best done in stages, kind of starting the work and then revisiting it over and over and over again. And I hope that this podcast episode has helped you to do that. Last week, we looked at the question, where am I? Which explored where we are in life right now. So this is all the stuff that's temporary, the stuff that expresses what's going on for us at a particular stage of our lives. Now, these are the things that we can change if we don't like them. We also looked at our mindset stuff last week, which makes up a big part of the question, where we are. So we looked at our fears, our blocks, our limiting beliefs, because again, that's all stuff that we can change. So this is all important stuff to dig up and to look at so that we can answer the third question, which is what we're doing today. Where am I going? Where am I headed in life? What path am I on? Where do I want to be headed? So each question builds on previous weeks. So if you haven't listened to the 2 previous weeks, I'd recommend you do that before you start listening to this episode, or you can just keep going with this and then go back and listen to the others. So what are you going to learn this week? We're going to talk about why it's so important to know yourself, what you want in life, and where you want to be headed. We talk about the risks that come from avoiding taking a good look at this stuff. I talk about why it's so important and why it can be challenging for us to look at this stuff. I discuss how to get clear on where you want to be headed in your life, what you want to do, what you want to experience, and finally, why this is such an important part of planning the life that you want for yourself. So let's get started. So I really think that self-knowledge is one of the most important aspects of life. And I really think this is something that you can avoid it, but that probably won't get you to where you want to be in life. So if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you probably know that I'm really into the mindset stuff. I'm really into knowing myself and getting clarity on who I am and what I want to be doing in my life. This has changed drastically over the years, and I think this is an important thing. You're constantly refining and pivoting and adjusting your path. So it's not like the answers that you come to today will be set in stone. On the contrary, that's why I think it's so important to be revisiting these questions and revisiting this work, because things are constantly changing. The goals that we set for ourselves at the beginning of the year may still be relevant, or they may need to change. This year has not exactly kind of turned out the way I wanted, or that's not true. It's not exactly turned out the way I thought it would at the beginning of the year. My focus has been a little bit different, and that's mainly because certain things that I had signed up for and certain things that I'd planned have taken more of my time and more of my headspace. So I spent more time on that and less time on other things that I used to spend time on. So next year, what I need to do is get clear again on what I want to be doing with my life, what I want to be focusing on. This is going to change constantly because as we grow and as we know ourselves better, our priorities change, our wants change, our desires change, and so we need to adjust our plan on our goals and our path. So this should absolutely always be flexible, but you still need to have a starting place. You still need to know where you want to be headed so that you can walk in that direction. Otherwise, you'll just be wandering around with no end in sight or no path so I think it's really, really important to get clear on this, even though it's meant to be flexible and it's meant for you to revisit it and update on a regular basis. So what are the risks from not looking at this? The risks are that you fall into the trap of just letting things happen to you, making decisions without really thinking about how they're going to affect your life in the long term, and ending up in places where you might not want to be. Have you ever thought in your life, how did I get here? How did I get to where I am? How did I end up in this? Well, that was all a result of decisions that you made, of course, or decisions that you didn't make or neglected to make and just let things kind of happen. So not making a decision is, of course, the same as making a decision because you're making the decision to not take action. So it's all of our little decisions that have led us to where we are today. And if you're not where you want to be, then figure out where you do want to be and start forging the path to get there. It's that easy. Of course, there are many kind of sub-steps and actions and things that you need to take, but it all starts with getting to know where you want to be headed. And this is all a part of taking responsibility for your own life and taking charge of your own life and making sure that you live the life that you want to live, rather than just living the life that you think you got stuck with. That's not how it works. So I think it's really important for us to look at this stuff because otherwise, again, we end up in a place where we don't know how we got here. So if you want to live a happy life, full of joy, full of the experiences that you want to be having, you gotta plan it. It doesn't just happen on its own. Now, I think this is such an interesting topic for me this week because unfortunately, I've thrown away a lot of my old planners, actually all of them. And I'm so sad about that because I've started noticing. So I used to do the Leonie Dawson planners, which I think I've mentioned last week, but I used to do those every year. And as part of those planners, they have like 100 things that you want to do. And I didn't always treat those as 100 things I wanted to do in that year, but more like kind of like a bucket list of 100 things I wanted to do sometime. And, I never managed to achieve or do all those 100 things in each year because that's not really how I had planned it. But I'm starting to notice that things that I had written down 2-3 years ago, I'm now experiencing. But I'm experiencing them because 2-3 years ago, I identified that I wanted these things. I wanted to do these things. I wanted to have these things. And now my life is at the point where I've got them. I'm doing them. But I first had to identify that I wanted those things in order to get here. So we've talked about like manifesting, we've talked about achieving goals, and it doesn't always happen in the timeline that you want it to happen or that you think it's going to happen. But if it's something that you still really want and you still continue to work for, it'll happen. So there we go. The important thing is to know what you want, which is what we're talking about today. So how to get clear on where you want to be headed in life. So again, this is based on old notes and old blog posts, and I'll link to those in the show notes here, of stuff that I wrote back in 2011 as a result of this talk that I gave that was based on the 3 questions. So a lot of this stuff is kind of basic life coachy stuff. So you may have heard of this before, or you may not have. But I think this stuff is all still really useful. It's like I was talking about the Wheel of Life last week. I still find it really useful to get kind of a visual representation of where I am in each aspect of my life or each area of my life so that I know what I want to focus on. So this week, where am I going? What can you do to figure that out? You may have heard of the vision board or vision list. It's that kind of collage thing where you go through old magazines and you cut out pictures and you glue them onto a big piece of paper and you hang it on the wall. If you haven't heard of this, I have a whole blog post that I will link to in the show notes that kind of walks you through the process of how to do this. I learned a very intuitive way of doing a vision board. So it's not necessarily looking for specific images like I want this car, I want that house, and then cutting them out. It's more like tapping into the feeling of what you want to be feeling in your life, and then just cutting out pictures that resonate with you. So again, I'll link to that in the show notes. But that can be a really clear way. Now, the first time that I used this method of doing a vision board was back in, I think, 2011 when I was doing my spiritual coaching course. And I did this vision board that was all water and rivers and streams and forests and green. It was very green and blue. And I remember finishing it and saying to someone in the class, like, I don't know what this means. But it was just all very nature focused. And at the time I was living in London, so city. Well, later on that year, I ended up moving to the place where I'm living now in Surrey. And I mean, it's not the same pictures, but like there's that little creek that runs through town and there's a river nearby and there's forests everywhere. And it's the real life representation of that vision board that I created. So at some level, my soul was craving nature. It was craving blues and greens. It was craving water and forests and things. Then I moved to a place where that was my reality. So sometimes it doesn't make sense when you do that. When you do the vision board the intuitive way, so do it whichever way works for you. Either find the specific stuff that you want, or tap into the feeling of things that you want to experience, or the feeling of the life that you want to experience. I find it very useful to do it either way. But I think the intuitive way is really useful because all this stuff, the car, the house, or whatever it is that you want, really, it's not necessarily those things that we want, but it's what we think they're going to give us, the feeling that they're going to give us, the lifestyle that we think that they represent. So vision boards can be absolutely useful. And again, I have linked to that in the show notes. Another thing that's really related to this, which I just mentioned, is the bucket list, which is where you make 100 or 500 or 1,000 things that you want to do in your life. This is kind of combined with another thing where you can make a list of things that you want to be, do, or have in your life. So you could combine these two and make a bucket list of all of the things that you want to be, do, or have at some point in your life. I think this is really useful, and I haven't done this in years. And actually yesterday I came across someone's bucket list online, and it inspired me to just kind of sit down and write a few things. And I didn't get beyond like 25 or 30 things, but it got me thinking, not only about things that used to be on my list when I did Leonie Dawson's planners, but how things have changed. So I think it's really useful to create a list like this. And then, of course, refine it every year, because it needs to be every year or multiple times a year, because your interests are going to change. But I think it's really useful to just do a brain dump of all the things that you want to experience at some point in your life. And this is the place where you can really dream big. So no one's going to see it. You don't have to share it with anyone. You can just share anything that you want to experience, anything that you want to be, do, or have at some point in your life. And this is a good way to just get stuff out of your head and really focus on, if there were no limits, what would you want for your life? What do you want to experience in your life? So if you haven't done this, or if it's been a while since you've done it, I highly recommend that you do that, because it's really, really useful. So if you have done a bucket list before, take it out, wherever it is, go over it and update it. So what things have you done that were on the list? What things are you no longer interested in? And what things do you want to make happen? Now, obviously, the first part of all of this is kind of downloading from your head into paper or onto a file on your computer, all the things that you want to experience, whether that's through your vision board or your bucket list or whatever, but you need to dump this stuff somewhere and get it to where you can see it. So like I often talk about mindset stuff, you've got to kind of dig it up out of your mind and get it into a place where you can do something with it. So think about the big things. So we looked at the wheel of life. Like, what are the different things that you want to be, do, and have in each area of your life? In your spiritual life, in your career or business, in your personal life, in your relationships with friends, family, all those different areas. What do you want to experience in each of those areas? So get it all out of your head and into somewhere that you can see it. And then it's about taking action to achieve those things. And obviously, if you create a bucket list with like 100 things or more, that can feel overwhelming. But again, you don't have to do all these things in 1 year. You've got your life, which we don't know how long that's going to last, but you've got your life to do these things. So pick the one that seems easiest to attain, or the one that's most exciting to work towards, or whatever, and start working towards it. Start making plans, start saving money if it's something that requires money, or start learning the things you need to learn to make it happen. But this is how you create the life that you want. You first got to get clear on it, and then you've got to set your goals and make your plans so that you can achieve the things you want to achieve in life and be, do, and have all the things that you want to experience in your life. Now, sometimes this path that we're on requires us to step into a new identity. And I've talked about new identities a lot on this podcast because I feel like I keep kind of shifting identities quite a bit. So sometimes we need to stop and figure out, who do we need to be in order to have this lifestyle that we want or experience these things that we want. So I've mentioned my friend Cara Wilde has her New Identity Masterclass, and that can really help you get clear on who you need to be to achieve these things. But you can also spend the time just thinking about it. Ask yourself the question, like once you've got your bucket list or your vision board or whatever is your representation of the things that you want to do and the lifestyle you want to live, ask yourself the question, journal on this. Who do I need to be to achieve these things? Who do I need to be to live this life? And then journal about it, write it down, and be really honest with yourself. Do you need to be more confident? Do you need to be more assertive? Do you need to have learned something new? Do you need to have different skills? Get clear on who you need to be to achieve those things. And then there's the step where you need to ask yourself, am I willing to become this? Am I willing to step into this new identity? Am I willing to learn these things I need to learn, or up-level my self-confidence, or whatever it is? Oftentimes it's just an issue of self-worth and self-confidence and believing in ourselves that can prevent us from stepping into this new identity or stepping into this new kind of level of our lives. So think about what it is that you need to make the shift from where you are to what's lying on this path. And like I said, you need to set goals, prioritize. So I've talked about priorities a lot on this podcast, but you need to look at what's most important to you. What is most important in terms of what you want to experience? Pick those things, create a plan to achieve them, and then start taking the action. Start walking the path. That's the only way you're going to get from where you are to where you want to be headed in life, to what you want to experience in life. You know, I see a lot of people online kind of complaining about where they are. And I think I mentioned this the other week, someone who had said something like, how did you come to terms with the fact that you're never going to achieve the things that you thought you were going to? And it just made me really, really sad. Because if you're not dead yet, and of course you're not if you're listening to this, and the person who asked the question on the internet obviously was also alive, like, you still got time. Like, unless you're on your deathbed, you probably still have time to do the things that you want to do. Or change your plan and update the things that you want to do, the things that you want to achieve. But I really don't believe that. I think we're all capable of a lot more than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that most of our limitations come from within. Most of our limitations are those that we set up for ourselves. And it's hard to get over those because oftentimes we don't see them as self-imposed limitations. We think that they are that's just the way it is. I can't have this thing. I can't do this thing. I'm never going to be whatever. And it can be really, really hard to recognize that these limitations are made up. They don't really exist. So if you ever find yourself looking at your list, your vision board, your bucket list, whatever, and you just think, I could never do this. I could never be this. I could never have this. Or you find yourself stopping yourself from writing things down because you think it's not possible for you, make yourself write them down and then ask yourself why. Like, what's going on? Like, why is this not possible for you? Why do you not believe that you can achieve this? And that's the mindset stuff that we need to work on. I mean, I have gotten to where I am today in terms of my inner landscape and, my lifestyle because I've been willing to do the deep work. I've been willing to dig up my mind crap, and I've been willing to transform it and make the changes I need to make on an internal level so that I could make the changes I wanted to make on an external level. But you got to do the work. You can't expect people to hand things to you on a platter. And I think most people that are living the lives that they want to live will tell you that they had to work to get there. And I don't think it's necessarily has to be like hard work, and I don't think you necessarily have to suffer to get there, but there's work. You've got to take action. You've got to do stuff. And I think also that the word work to some people has become kind of a dirty word or a bad word or an unpleasant word. You see people using words like playbook instead of workbook, and I can't stand that word. But it's really become common on the internet. Like I keep seeing the word playbook and it drives me crazy every time I see it because what the hell is wrong with work? Like there's nothing wrong with work. Work can be fun. It can be deeply satisfying if we choose to make it that way. And I think this kind of inner work is deeply satisfying. Once we start doing it, we see changes instantly. Within days, within weeks, things start shifting, things start changing, things are different. So when I created heart-centered energy work, it has the word work in it. And I really debated about that because I'm aware of how some people kind of react to the word work. And I thought, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to use the word work. It is work, and I think work is good. Again, I don't think that you need to suffer. I don't think it needs to be hard work, but you need to do the work, which is why I keep talking about mindset work so much. So I'm going to get off my rant here. I hope this episode has helped you kind of give you some ideas that, maybe you've probably heard of before, but have never taken action on, or maybe you did and haven't revisited it. So this is my invitation to you. Take action. Go to the show notes, hollyworton.com/317. Find my blog post on the vision board. Do a vision board. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't, but it's worth giving it a try if you haven't done it before. And do a bucket list. Create your bucket list and dump everything out of your head onto a list, whether it's in your journal, on a piece of paper, on your computer. There are apps for bucket lists. If you're stuck for ideas, just Google bucket lists. You will find people posting theirs online. I found some people had like lists of 1,000 things, 500, hundreds of stuff. Go through them and just see what other people want to experience in their lives. And then that might give you an idea of what you want to experience in yours. Because I think also sometimes if we get in the mindset where, oh, I never get what I want and life sucks and it's too bad, and we're not feeling that great about where we are, then it can be really hard to think of what's possible, of what we could be experiencing instead of the crap that we're currently experiencing. So give yourself permission to dream big on this. Use other people's lists as examples, but get it all out where you can see it. And then do the work to achieve those things, because also taking steps towards achieving these things will also trigger your mind crap, which means that it'll bring up stuff for you to work on. So I hope you found this useful. As usual, that's always my kind of hope. I hope you take the actions. I hope you give this a try. I hope you revisit your bucket list if you already have one, or that you try a new one. And I hope that this helps you start making different decisions for your life to get to the places that you want to get, to experience the things you want to experience. I originally went into this episode thinking I was going to give you like a list of like all these different things to do. But honestly, it's just about dumping them out of your head and into somewhere where you can see them, and then take an action. So I welcome your feedback as usual. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at holly@hollyworton.com, or you can find me online and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And I will be back next week with another solo episode, probably not on the 3 questions. I will definitely revisit these, might be revisiting them with Joe Casey, possibly Joanna Hennon, because I want to get other people's take on this. And I really think this is going to be the focus of my work in the future. So we shall see. So remember to visit hollyworton.com/317 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.